Hello, this is Sondra Oster Baras bringing you a few words of Bible from the heart of Biblical Israel. This week's Torah portion is Ki Tisa, and it begins in Exodus chapter 30 with verse 11. And the first few verses in the Torah portion gives a particular instruction. God instructs Moses and teaches them, this is how you are going to count. This is how you are going to take a census of the nation of Israel. When you take a census of the Israelite people according to their enrollment, each shall pay the Lord a ransom for himself on being enrolled. The word ransom, I would argue with. The word in Hebrew is kofar. And while kofar can be used as ransom, it comes from the root of atonement. And so in this case, it's not like a bribe, which is how you would normally think of a ransom. It is some sort of payment in atonement, paying into the temple, paying to God in atonement for your sins. But listen to this last section of that verse, that no plague may come upon them through their being enrolled or being counted. And basically, what we see here is a very precise description and instruction on how one conducts a census or how one counts the nation. You don't walk around counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? You don't have them, fill out pieces of paper and you count their forms, okay? Everybody gives a half a shekel. And it's very clear that regardless of how wealthy or how poor you are, this is a standard amount that everybody gives exactly the same amount, a half a shekel. And this money is then used in the temple for the service in the temple. In other words, it's a donation that goes straight to God, but it's not the way we see in the chapters that deal with the construction of the tabernacle. There's a lot of volunteering going on. You give as much as you can, you give whatever you have. In this case, it's a very set amount that every single person gives, and it is therefore very easily used to count. You count the coins, you don't count the people, okay? Everybody gives in the coins. There's a 1/2 shekel to every single person. And it's not everybody, of course. It is those of military age. It's men from 20 years old and up. And therefore, it's counted. And then you count the gold. You have, exactly, count the silver, you know exactly how many people you have. And at the same time, you have all this money for the service of the temple. And it's very significant because, and not to be taken lightly, and we see later on in the book of Samuel what happens when this is not done. Okay, this is a story at the very, very end of 2 Samuel. It's chapter 24. It's actually the last chapter. And that chapter begins kind of, it's a little odd. It says, the anger of the Lord flared up against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, go and count Israel and Judah. So the question is, what does this mean that God's anger came against Israel and therefore he incited David? Now, in Chronicles, we have the very same story, except there's a slight difference, a difference that seems to be quite significant. It is that God was angry at Israel, and it was Satan who incited David to sin. Be that as it may, I don't believe that it's God who's inciting. It can be Satan, or it could be that God is angry as a result of whatever it is that incited David. I don't believe God here is causing David to sin. That would not make a whole lot of sense. But it's clear that God is very angry at David for what he has done. What is it that he's done? He sends out his officers to just count everybody. No half a shekel. No connection with anything. Now, at this time, there isn't a tabernacle, okay, but there is an ark, and the ark already has been brought to Jerusalem, and but even if it wasn't yet brought to Jerusalem, because it's not exactly sure when this happened in the chronologically in Samuel, but let's assume it really was at the end that the ark would have already been in Jerusalem. But even if it wasn't in Jerusalem, it was somewhere else. There was service. There was some level of even though there wasn't a temple and there wasn't a tabernacle, there was certainly a way to do this properly, that they would put money in to pay for the service of the Lord, and that money itself, that half a shekel, would serve as an atonement. What is this all about, though? I mean, here in the case of David, there was a punishment and there was a plague as a result of what happened here. But why does it matter so much? Why does it matter if you count people or if you count the coins? Why does counting have to come as part of this giving of the coins? And I think the answer to that is that word kofar, that word that is, I think, wrongly translated as ransom, but talks about money that is to redeem you, to provide atonement. When kings want to count people, it is a way of assessing their strength and their power. It is very often affiliated with some sense of arrogance. And the king who will then say, oh, I am mighty and my nation is mighty and I can take on anything. And so therefore God is restricting that. He doesn't want there to be major counts that will serve to raise up the spirit of man in a not positive way, in a haughty and arrogant way. And therefore he wants to tie in the counting of the nation at all times with this idea of atonement and service. If the counting itself is part of a ceremony whereby each individual being counted is giving to God, and that giving is an equalizer. Everybody gives the same amount. People are atoned in that way for their sins. This becomes not a ceremony of power and arrogance, but becomes a ceremony of humility, where everyone in the nation is, at the same time that he's being counted, he's giving money, and he is participating in service, and he is asking for atonement. He is recognizing that he has sinned somewhere along the way, and the nation as a whole is asking for atonement. The king is asking for atonement for the entire nation. And unfortunately, this is something that David missed. And right after he did it, he recognized right away that he did the wrong thing. And of course, he's the one who immediately repents and tries to atone for his sin. There is a punishment, but there is such amazing humility and recognition of where he went wrong in David. And this, of course, is part of the lesson that we are learning in this week's Torah portion, the very first verses of the portion. Have a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.